going to call the Amherst School Committee meeting to order at 6:46. I appreciate the committee changing the time so that those who are interested and able can go and hear Dr. Jonathan Kozel speak at Amherst College. So one thing you'll notice on the agenda is that I'm copying Kip Fonch at the Region and have asked times to be put on agenda items because I think it's very respectful of the committee's time and the audience's time, and reminds us that this is a business meeting and we have business to do, and that we don't necessarily want an ongoing public forum during a business meeting amongst ourselves. So I've done that. So we have minutes from August 21st.
Hi, Lawrence.
Hi, Lawrence. Are there anything, before we go to that, is there anything about the times on the agenda that people think would be problematic? Or questions? I've put times on the agenda now.
Yeah.
Copying Kip.
Oh. He's an inspiration.
He's an
Keeping us busy.
inspiration. Okay. Are there any, is there any discussion about the minutes of August 21st? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of the August 21st meeting.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
I'll abstain.
You abstain, because you weren't here?
I won't be there.
Okay, thank you. One abstention. Okay, public comment. For those who have public comment, please come to the microphone. Tell us your name, and please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Absolutely, 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Thanks.
I'm gonna just
Whatever works for
Yes.
you.
raise it up a little bit. Okay. My name is Tom Jamate, and I am the parent of a 3rd grader at Crocker Farm. And I'm just part of a group of concerned parents from the 3rd grade. And I just want to read a very brief 2-minute page that we put together expressing our concerns. We want to thank the school committee and the superintendent for your dedication and time to improving public education in Amherst. We know that you're not doing this for the glory and the high pay, so we appreciate your service. Last year, Crocker Farm had 2 2nd grade classes with 24 pupils in each, numbers that were above the district average of about 19 children per class. These classes were, we feel, too large and resulted in a poor experience for a lot of the children in the class. Parents expressed frustration at the amount of time required for transitions and discipline, which sapped energy and focus from the academic and social curriculum. Some have described their child's 2nd grade experience as a lost year. This year, we note that there are now 3 classes of 16 students in the 2nd grade at Crocker Farm. This year's 2 3rd grade classes at Crocker Farm have 22 and 23 students each. From these figures, we believe that this is currently the largest elementary school classrooms in the district. Fort River and Wildwood have 3 3rd grade classrooms with about 20 students each. We would like to see resources distributed equitably so that our children have the same opportunities for close teacher attention as other students in the district. In June, 34 parents signed a letter asking for the administration to create a 3rd classroom for our children at Crocker Farm this fall. We met with Superintendent Jarek and the Crocker Farm co-principal Derek Shea before the start of the school year, and ultimately they decided to hire a single paraprofessional who was split between the 2 classrooms. And although this is a good starting point, we believe that further steps will be necessary long term. I guess it just seems that this particular 3rd grade cohort, these 2 classes at Crocker Farm, are part of a little bit of an elephant moving through the snake. We know that everyone here shares the same goal at Crocker Farm, that all of Crocker Farm 3rd graders will end up this year at or above grade level. It is also our hope that a third section of fourth grade will be created for the fall of 2013. We think this is necessary as our children mature and face greater academic challenges moving forward into the third, fourth, and fifth grade. We are also here to ask the committee what we can do as parents to ensure that sufficient resources are available to achieve these goals. So what can we do as parents to make sure the resources are there, to make sure this group of third graders at Crocker Farm, and of course all children, have the resources that they need to do the best they can. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Do you have copies of this letter that we
Absolutely.
can distribute to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Is there other public comment? Thank you. So we will move to the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Okay, so, just some brief updates this evening. So one is that, as you all know, in a few weeks, we'll be having a presentation around the after-school program, which is a new transition into a partnership between the town of Amherst, Leisure Services, the public schools, and 2 private nonprofits. While the transition has happened, we're in the process of building programming, and overall fairly smooth, a couple bumps in the road, but things are going quite well. So we'll be having people come and speak to you about that specifically in a few weeks. But one thing we are doing right now is we are beginning some of our fundraising regarding our after-school program, which we mentioned when we had the out-of-school time programs looked at by the evaluator from Wellesley. So we are asking our partners and businesses to sponsor a child for after school. So you'll be seeing this letter come out tomorrow. And it's, if you want to sponsor a child in an after-school program for a full year, the cost is $470. So I'm going to be putting that out so people know that we really are at this point trying to build up a fund so that any child who wants to go to after school, regardless of the family's ability to pay, that they're able to attend. But we'll bring you more information, but people can look to this information, which will be on our website, and letters will be coming out to the community as well. We also, Dr. Guevara has been working with family members and higher ed to bring Spanish translators to each of the school offices. So we will be having, I believe next week, a translator once per week for a few hours in each of the offices to help with families calling in and asking questions about the school, but also to be able to reach out to families. And again, it's a volunteer effort, which I think is remarkable that people are, really stepping up and willing to help all of our schools. So each school will be represented by a translator in our front office. Also, many of you may have heard, we had Dr. Cosby, Bill Cosby, visited Wildwood last week, and we did not really publicize because that was his request, but it was a great opportunity for kids to meet Bill Cosby. It was really, I have to say, it was really funny because those of us at a certain age, we think of Bill Cosby in a certain way, stand up or Fat Albert. And the kids, all the little kids came up to him in the hallway when I was watching. They were like, "Little Bill, Little Bill." And those of you who have kids in that age range, it really was quite clear. And it was really fun to watch him interacting with kids. And I think it was really meaningful for the children. And I know staff appreciated it as well. And then he spent some time in their opening assembly as well. So we appreciate that time that he spent with us. Fort River has their annual readathon. That was a tremendous success. Fran Luddington, who's the librarian, saw more kids discussing books, sharing their favorites, meeting new friends as a result of the readathon. And they raise money through pledges, which are used through the PGOs to improve the schools. So we just want to thank people for stepping up and making this such a successful event. Crocker Farm is also continuing its composting program under Susan Waite, who many people know, who's the recycling coordinator for the town of Amherst. And she's really encouraging all schools and all students to be vigilant in their recycling. And we appreciate Susan's support of our school. in her help with these efforts. I also did want to mention that we have been contacted by UMass about potentially, which is not reflected on this sheet, I forgot to add that on. They have some grant funding, and they're interested in beginning permaculture gardens at each of our Amherst elementary schools. So we are meeting with UMass next week, and we are hoping that this goes forward so that we are able to have some amazing opportunities for kids at the school level at each of the elementary schools. And then the last thing I'll just say, we have a few dates of coming up. We have Crocker Farms Open House is September 19th, which is tomorrow, right? I have to remember that one. October 3rd is Fort River, and Pelham is the 10th, and Wildwood is October 3rd. So Wildwood and Fort River are sharing that night. So for families who have children in our schools, we hope that you come to Open House, and I will be there as well. I just have to remind myself tomorrow night. And then middle school and high school have those dates as well, which I represent at the regional schools. So those are the updates for tonight.
Thank you. Are there other announcements? I did want to just announce again that I've started office hours at the Loose Goose on Thursdays, and Rick is joining me. And if there are other school committee members who are interested in doing that, 7:30 to 9:30 on Thursday mornings. So Rick and I are alternating at this point. But we invite other people to do it, even if you can just do it, a couple of times a semester or whatever. But I know your schedules are busy, but I just wanted to,
And that's a wonderful thing to offer.
yes. Okay, so Rob is going to talk with us about the budgets on our report.
You'll have the report as part of your packets.
Did they come in the packets?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe they did. Oh, actually, I
No.
So we just
downloaded-
handed
I
out.
downloaded.
Yeah, it didn't go out with the
Yeah.
packet,
You out?
but we have.
We have.
Yeah, we got it.
Pass them around. I got some here, you got some there.
Yeah, we have them all. Multiple copies.
All right. I hope you had a chance to review it ahead of time, because there's a lot of information here, and none of it's new. So we've been talking about this on a quarterly basis as to where we're going. And sure enough, we ended up pretty much right on target. So at the end of the year, we had, out of $20,758,000 of budget, we had $5,800 left over, which will go back to the town's general fund, okay? Some of the highlights, I'm not gonna go through this whole report. I put some detail in here so you can see how the ebbs and flows went. The highlights are that risk and benefits was $136,000 under budget. And what is that? That's health insurance costs were $67,000 under budget. Workers' comp was under budget. Retirement benefits were well under budget due to retirement benefits being prepaid in FY11 and so forth. You can see the back and forth in the wording. But that freed up quite a bit of money. Utilities, $65,000 under budget. Why? Well, the same as we heard in the region report. It was a very warm winter, so we had very good variance in the heating, and we also struck a new contract for electricity, which helped us quite a bit. So that was good. Special ed, the out-of-district placements were substantially less than budgeted, and as you recall, we factored that in last November into the FY13 budget because we weren't needing that anymore. So that all rolls forward. And what is more than we have budgeted? Well, you have to be careful about the more than we budgeted in salaries because we couldn't budget COLAs and steps because we were still in negotiations at the time, right? So that, once that was settled, it required an additional $334,000 to be moved up. So that's reflected there. And then there's another $450,000 So 636,000 was transferred up to do some staff additions in kindergarten, first grade, special ed, intervention, music, art. But this is all stuff we've talked about over the last, 6 months or so, so there's nothing new going on there. Now I don't know if we talked about the Wednesday, extending Wednesdays for paraprofessionals, needing an extra 30,000. I don't recall if we did that in the
don't
third
know if
quarter or not. But
I
that's
don't
one
think we had
piece.
the amount finalized
Yeah,
at that
okay.
point.
And then there was another $82,000 of other staffing adjustments that, are small increments that we too lengthy to list here. So overall, it all worked out well. We used what we had. We didn't spend what we didn't need to spend, and we came in on target. So let me just leave it there and see if there's any questions without just, droning on. I'd be happy to entertain this.
Rob?
Just want you to remind me of the salary increase. Was there a placeholder in the budget that moved from?
Yeah, that was down to control accounts. There was a, salary adjustments line in there, if you want to go to the detail line thing. And we had a placeholder there that we used to cover COLAs and steps. Yeah,
And
and we were
Rob,
pretty close, excuse me.
That's what I was going to ask. So
Yeah.
your placeholder, you felt, I mean, we sort of met the placeholder.
Oh, yeah, we had a little more than was in here, but not a whole lot more. Yeah.
And if I just want to make note of a couple areas that we watch closely each year and that we will have to consider when we're entering into budget time again. We did increase this past year our ELL translation costs, but we look at last year, ran over by close to $30,000. And then also homeless transportation over budget by about $26,000. So there's some of those areas that as we move into the have the October 1 figures and we start to look at our demographics, we're going to have to take a good look at budget time about how to fund these few areas.
I just one of those, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One of those little points of interest in terms of homeless transportation. You may recall that last year, there was a suit brought about an unfunded mandate for transporting homeless kids. And the suit went against the state, and the state now has to reimburse us 100% of the cost for transporting homeless kids. So in FY13, we will receive 100% reimbursement for our expenses that incurred in FY12.
Oh, that's
What I'm told by DESE is that probably won't happen until like May or so, until after all the end-of-year reports are actually audited and certified, and some districts take longer than others. So, but we will get the money coming in about May. Now, what's interesting in Amherst, or any other town school system, is the money will go directly to the town to be deposited into their general fund. It doesn't come to the schools. But, the town will have that money available for next year to hopefully support the schools. Yeah.
Rob?
Along those lines, what about at the regional level?
At the region, it comes to the region, and it goes into the general fund, E&D, if you will, again, available for next year's budget support.
okay.
But we only have the schools to support. There's no competition.
Right.
Rick, did you want to put
Yeah, just to be clear, or just also remind myself that there is no reserve in the Amherst school budget like there is for the
Correct.
regional budget, so you have to be at or under the budget.
That's correct, yep.
And how are you able to get exactly $6,000 under the budget? You must sort of hold back expenses, and then at the last minute decide to,
Actually, what we did is we, as we did last year, prepaid some special education out-of-district placements, okay? And so as prepaid some last year, we had that freed up for this year, and we used that money to prepay for next year. And the specific amount, of course, was influenced by how much we had left. And so that's where that
I
went.
see.
Shabazz?
So what, given that, what will happen to the 5,891? And I have a second question.
That reverts to the town's general fund and becomes part of their reserves.
The second thing is, what was the audit comment that resulted in a change in the reporting practice on contracts?
So those pieces of people's time are paid for on a contracted basis for like riding vans as monitors or for whatever. They're not really salaries, so to speak. They're more like contracted pieces. And we've been showing them in the salary lines for the different programs, thinking being as you show where the expenses are in the programs. But the auditors now are just more aware of like what's a salary, what's an expense, and what's a contracted piece. And so it's nothing different. It's just that we're moving those contracted pieces out of salary lines, which would show up down here, into contracted lines. It's just a reclassification, if you will.
Not vice versa,
Yeah.
just in that one direction.
Yeah, it's getting all those little extra pieces that are contracted to people into the contracted bucket, if you will.
Other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Rob.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I was just going to do a brief regionalization update. We had a pretty good one by Michael DeCara at Region. But since then, we had our next board meeting. We had it at Shutesbury Elementary School, which was very nice. We took a tour, met with the principal. And the main focus of that meeting was that we finalized the DESE grant, which had to go in last week, and we should hear about that in October. And we talked about the CIC grant, the Community Innovations Challenge grant, which is another, as Michael explained in Region, and I'm clear about now, we applied for that last year. We didn't get it in part because we had not yet formed a board. That grant, unlike the DESE grant, is open to innovations in all kinds of different ways in districts, whereas the DESE grant is specifically focused on regionalization and supporting the investigation of regionalization. So, we applied again, we have a board, or we will apply again, and we'll see what happens with the CIC grant. The other thing that was discussed on the 12th was we heard a long presentation by the Communications Subcommittee. And one of the things, and they're tasked with figuring out how the board is going to communicate what's going on with all 4 communities, which is, harder than it seems at times. And already there is confusion and some miscommunication about even what the board is and what our charge is. So one of the things we talked about was making it very clear to everyone that the board's charge is to look at all the things we've been unable to look at over the last 50 years with some more, in a much finer way with professional consultants in these particular areas, and make a recommendation, which will come in March. And after that recommendation is made, each town is going to vote. So it's not up to the board, but there seems to be a sense of, in various communities, that the board is going to make this decision. So we really talked about getting that word out. And one of the things that Michael talked about is this idea of concentric circles and getting information out, sort of starting with stakeholders who we know have connections, various connections in the community. So we've scheduled a meeting November 3rd at the middle school, Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, and are inviting all the committees from all 4 towns, the select boards from all 4 towns. State legislators will be there, local state legislators. And at that time, we will make a presentation about what the issues are around regionalization. We will update people on what's happened so far and present a timeline and how we see the board moving forward. And from there, so that will happen in October, and then in November, December. Oh, I'm sorry, that's November, and then towards the end of the year, in December, and then January, we're gonna start doing public forums in each community. And communicating in other ways. And one of the things that the board identified was spokespeople for each community, somebody to speak with media and somebody to speak with community members should they have questions. So in Amherst, that person is going to be Andy Steinberg, the Finance Committee, who also is the chair of the Regionalization Board. So if you have questions or you have a group that you want somebody from the board to speak to, Andy's the person to connect with. So I think the other thing is that the consultant subcommittee has been formed, which is the subcommittee, there's a member from each town who will be part of the vetting process and choosing of the consultant in each realm that we're gonna hire consultants in. So that board has been formed, that subcommittee has been formed, and I think they've had their first meeting. And they're focused right now on the educational consultant first. And I expect that that person will be on board sometime in October. So when I know more, I'll update you further. So are there any questions, or Rob?
Yeah, I'm just, quick question. So when you say the board makes a recommendation and the towns vote, I guess my question is, does the board write a regional agreement and the towns vote on that? Or if not, then who
No.
does write a regional agreement?
Right. The board will, so by March, the board will make a recommendation about a model, whether it be K6, K through 6, K through 12, or pre-K, actually, or to do nothing. The regional agreement will happen after that if there is a decision, if there's a recommendation that we're going to move in that direction. So the crafting of the regional agreement will happen
Yeah, after the votes.
after the votes.
I'm sorry, so,
After the recommendation. It won't happen after the town's vote.
because what would the towns be voting
Oh,
on?
that's right, the town votes in November.
The town will
Yeah,
vote on the
in fall.
draft
That's true.
of the regional agreement. So there'll be a recommendation, should we move forward? And if so, how? In what model? And then, based on that, the board will, with legal help and consulting, lots of it, will craft a regional agreement, and that's what's voted on. Lawrence?
Follow up to Rob, if the board votes and there's a majority in one direction and there's a minority, will they present reports, sort of why they take a position the way they do, in order to guide the towns going forward to, I imagine it's conceivable that the board won't necessarily be unanimous.
We're gonna,
So,
right,
yeah.
I
And
don't
then I have a
know.
follow-up, too.
I don't know if the board will be unanimous, I don't know. I do know it's a majority vote, and I think that it has to be a majority from each town.
Okay,
I believe that's what it is.
So, but I could be wrong, but I think that's it. So each town has 3 members,
right.
and at least 2 of those members have to vote to make a recommendation.
Okay.
So, does that
Yeah, that
answer your question?
clarifies a lot. And I have one other follow-up.
And there will, and there will be reports, public presentations by each consultant
Okay, that's
about
what
their
I'm-
findings.
That's what I was
So
wondering. yeah,
before
what-
even before we make the recommendation,
And forums.
there will
Okay.
be public forums, and the
Right.
consultants will be there with their reports.
With the reports, okay.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
And one other quick question, the November 3rd meeting,
Mhm.
is that open to the public in case someone is interested?
It is,
Okay.
yes.
And could I,
Mhm.
so it'll be run similarly to the four-town
Four-town,
meeting that we've
right.
had prior with the boards, and
Right.
then the audience could be there for, to observe the process, but
observe,
not
yeah.
to engage
Right.
in the
Engage,
process,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
And just again, timing-wise, if this did go to the 4 town meetings, it would have to be the fall of 2013 town
Mhm.
meetings in order to make the end of the year
Correct.
2013 requirement to do something in 2014,
Correct.
if that was the plan. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's I mean, I do have a copy of the timeline, actually. Have you received copies of the timeline? No.
I don't think so,
I
no.
think it'd be helpful to
Yeah,
have that.
I will get copies, and
Mhm.
I don't have the technical capacity to do that, but I will find someone who does,
Thank you.
and I will get you an email,
Michael could do that.
copy. Are
Okay.
there any other questions or comments about it? Okay. So we will move on, to subcommittee reports, and I think BCG is the only thing
I have so many of them, I'll pass mine out.
on the agenda.
Okay, here you are.
Thank you. And I've asked Rick to give us the update.
First, for people who don't know, the Budget Coordinating Group is a group of representatives from the town of Amherst, meaning the town government as opposed to, and then the Amherst elementary schools, the regional schools, and the library, because those are kind of the four components that go into the Amherst budget. And they get together to primarily do two things, I guess. One is to inform each other about what's going on at the state, what we think we're gonna get or not get, what the recommendations from Finance Committee might be on targets for our budgeting. Also talk about each other's budgets so that we understand each other's budgets, which I think for me is one of the best things to know. You know, what does the town need, what does the school need? We all understand what each other needs. That feels good to, you know, to have that kind of process going on. So at the September 13 meeting, there were basically two things discussed. One is a discussion about the operating surplus of $1.1 million that the town had, which is 1.7% of revenue. And I think it was just discussed that although $1 million sounds like a big surplus to be running, it's only 1.7% of the budget. And, you know, it's pretty hard to hit that close to the budget. So I'd rather, you know, see a surplus like that than the other way. And the other thing was that because the town is receiving $585,000 in state aid, in excess of what was budgeted, it's being recommended by the finance director and the town manager to consider putting that into the OPEB trust fund for the town. What the OPEB trust fund is, it was already voted to create the trust fund, but what it's for is to fund retiree health benefits, of which I think there's a $73 million liability right now. And so a lot of towns are starting to try to fund that fund because there is no fund. So that is what the town manager is recommending. I think the BCG will, as a group, might recommend or not recommend doing that. And then this committee may want to discuss what it thinks about that. And the regional committee will want to discuss it because the regional committee would have its own OPEB fund because it's a separate entity, whereas for this body, it's the town of Amherst OPEB fund that, you know, is part of what we do. That's basically it.
And it looks like there's the four boards meeting on Thursday, October 11th. So, which the school committee attends. And that's gonna be at the town hall at 6:30. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Maria.
And we also just, you know, the other thing that we discussed was really coordinating our calendars to make sure that our budget process was in sync with, you know, kind of the timelines that we needed to hit for us having the three budgets and also the town. So our schedule as it is very in sync with kind of the timelines and what we need to address as we move through the budget process.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And I also forgot to mention that the next regional board meeting is October 3rd at 6 o'clock at Pelham Elementary School. Topics for future agendas, and I think there has been some additional changes
Not,
to our schedule, or no?
I'm trying to think since the last time it's ever-changing document. I don't think so. Since the regional meeting, I think it's fairly stable. We did make the one change of that we have a meeting scheduled for Monday, the 24th, because of a holiday, Jewish holiday. So, and that presentation will include a presentation regarding the superintendent evaluation process, the new model from the state. And we'll be asking the committee members in advance to identify some priority areas for the superintendent goals, so that I can develop those. And we'll also have our MCAS presentation that night. I think, I believe everything else is fairly consistent. We still have a few topics that were yet to fit in,
Right.
that were raised by committee members, but I don't think there have been any other changes.
Okay, so we still want to fit in the dual immersion and the Spanish?
I have the
That's on
Spanish is
November
on.
Oh, is
20th.
it?
Yeah, I have the dual immersion and then the conversation around report card. And I think those were the only two that I held aside that I didn't insert into the schedule
Okay.
so far. Spanish is on and the after-school is on here as
Thank you.
well. Yep.
Right, okay. Rob?
Are we doing just regional MCAS on that Monday?
No, it's a joint meeting, so we'll be doing all.
Okay.
Rick?
You might want to, if you think you have time, you might want to think about putting OPEB on that meeting, because we didn't do it on September 11th, and that would be an opportunity to do it for both committees, but if not, then later.
Could I?
Yes.
Rob and I actually were discussing that today, and we were trying to figure out timeline, whether he wants to talk about that within the subcommittee first, but that may end up on here after we kind of figure out your timeline with the subcommittee.
I think the subcommittee agenda's lined up, that might be a good place to do a background
Yeah,
Okay,
before we read the whole body.
okay.
thank you, Rob.
Thanks. Are there other agenda items that we didn't? So there was one other item that was not on the agenda, and it's not a vote, but Debbie was going to speak to an easement issue.
You have in front of you, sorry about this, a memo from Guilford Mooring, who is the superintendent of public works for the town of Amherst. At the August 23rd, 2011 school committee meeting, he presented a proposal to the school committee to grant some temporary and permanent easements for a sidewalk project that is happening along the bridge on Pelham Road. And they needed some easements on the Fort River property in order to make a pathway for people to walk during construction, but it would also mean that a small portion of that easement would be permanent and would not go back to Fort River. At that meeting, the board voted unanimously to approve it. Apparently, when they started sending in the paperwork for the project, the Mass DOT did not think they needed the easements, and so they didn't ask for the information. Now they do need them. They actually need a slightly smaller easement than the committee approved prior. But because they're not asking for more, you don't really need to vote again, but we do need the committee to sign the paperwork that Ms. Oppie has, if you're all comfortable with it. It was voted unanimously by the previous board, but of course, Mr. Shabazz and Mr. O'Brien were not members of that board. If you're comfortable with it, then Ms. Oppie will pass that around and get everyone's signature.
Any questions?
My only question, and I probably already know this, but why do we have to vote easements if the town owns that property? 'Cause yes, it's a school, but do we control it as the school committee?
Well, apparently so, but I'm not quite sure about that either, to tell you the truth.
Rick?
Yeah, I think that's true, because remember, I think there was another parcel somewhere that we actually had
Yeah,
to give
Wildwood.
away.
Wentworth.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wildwood
at the-
Middle School we did as well.
At the same meeting,
I think that
you
it's the
granted easements.
organization that requires it, who's,
Yes, I do believe that it's the Mass DOT, not the town of Amherst, that's requiring the school committee to vote.
probably just that we're okay with it, even though it's not our land.
Maybe we own more than we think.
Yeah, I doubt that.
Okay.
So Are people comfortable signing? Great.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. So I will,
And you're the governing board.
Huh?
I will sign and pass it on. So, I think we've done an incredibly quick meeting. Thank you. So that people can go to Amherst College. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? So adjourn. Thank you.
The answer's here.